Go.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's Wilka here. I am the host of the Leadership Talks podcast. And today I have a very darling special guest, Tiffany Townsend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, I'm super excited. It's been forever since I got
It has been
to,
forever.
got
It's
to
really good
talk
to
to
see you.
you. So, Tiffany, introduce yourself to the audience.
So I am the executive vice president for global communications for New York City Tourism and Convention. So we used to be NYC and Company, New York City's official destination marketing organization, and we recently rebranded, and that included a name change. So we are now New York City Tourism and Convention. So very excited to be with you and to share with you.
Oh my gosh, Tiffany, we go way back when I first moved to New York, I think 10 years ago.
I
And
think it was the last time that I worked for New York City Tourism was when we first met.
it was like all over. We met it like in an event, and then, all of the fan tours and all of
Oh yeah.
social gathering with your New York City company. But I'm super excited to have you on the show because I think your story, your career, your changes, right? And of course, it's definitely an inspiration for a lot of African American women and
For sure.
Latina women as well. So talk to us about this journey of, how did you start in communications?
I started by accident. That's a long question. So I started by accident. I actually thought I was going to go to law school and be a diplomat, and life sort of had other plans. And so I was working as an intern at the U.S. mission to the UN in New York, and I at the end of my internship, I got an offer to move to one of the other departments, which happened to be the communications team at the time because there was an entry level opening there. And so that's kind of how I ended up there. As I said, a little bit by accident. I said, I like where I'm working. This seems cool. I don't know about a ton of communications, but um, let me kind of give this a go. This kind of seems like interesting work. And so from sort of an internship kind of snowballed into a more junior position, and that's sort of how the trajectory all started. I have a lot of colleagues in the industry who want to often want to be journalists, and often that's actually their training. So mine sort of came from a little bit of a different route and a little bit of happenstance, but I'm happy sort of where that all led me. And so I was there for about a year, and then I had an opportunity to work for the New Jersey governor's office, which is my home state. And so a colleague who I was working with in at the State Department asked me to join his comms team, and I became an assistant press secretary working in the New Jersey governor's office so many years ago. And so that's where I got I would say, my formative training in working in communications, very fast paced political world, which I think is always good training. And yeah, and so I was there actually only for about a year, but it was kind of fun really getting to be, driving and like all over my home state, learning about my home state, doing stuff in my home state. So it was a really interesting experience, and I worked with just a lot of great people as well. Um, so I was there for about a year, and then I ended up working at the Port Authority. I have received another opportunity to work at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So for any of your listeners or viewers who are not familiar with it, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is the bi-state agency that operates all of New York City's area airports. Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, as we know, all the crossings, the George Washington Bridge, things of that nature. So it's a huge
Just a
bi-state
small scope,
agency.
right? Just a small scope linking
Just a
everything.
tiny little scope. And so yeah, no big deal. Just planes, trains, and automobiles, the Port Authority bus terminal, a couple of ports, no big deal. But then I ended up working in the press office there, which was kind of amazing training because it was not that long after September 11th. And so we were really dealing with a lot of the aftermath of what would happen to the World Trade Center site at the time, and working with all of the families that were, that lost their loved ones, and just what would happen to the community down there. So it was really a very, very interesting time, in addition to just like kind of the amazing training that you receive and learning about how all of these pieces work. And I don't think I ever could have guessed that that would also help me so much in also working in tourism, knowing how the actual infrastructure works and how airlines work and what's important to them. And, and in the pass system, which, runs between New York and New Jersey, and how that's important to just travel. So all of, I got a really amazing education, how all of the actual infrastructure of how people get to New York City, which is now critically important in my job, how that all works. And so, it was actually, I spent about 5 years there working across the media relations office as well as the marketing office. And so got, different sides of like the same sort of experience, looking at it through a lot of different communications lenses and things like that, which was really neat. And so it turns out from there, and, as things go in your career, sort of the different relationships that you develop and one thing sort of leads to another. And so that's sort of how I ended up in tourism the first time. So a gentleman named Sean, who was my sort of boss and sort of colleague, and a little bit of a mentor, who's no longer with us. He was a wonderful guy. Sort of, made the introduction and sort of, said, hey, there's this role out there working for the city's tourism office, and was that something that you're sort of interested in? It's, the director of communications position. I was like, yeah, I mean, that seems cool. And I really didn't at the time. I was like, didn't get it, because like I knew I liked to travel, but I didn't get all of the levers, as I was saying, about how the tourism industry works. And it's really it's so much wider and deeper, I think, than people often think that it is. And so, so that was sort of like how I ended up here the first time, and being at the tourism office from 2007 to 2012 was a really amazing experience for me, because that was a moment when New York City was expanding a lot of its international presence, recognizing the importance of international visitors to New York City. And so, I had the opportunity to work on opening the office in India, the office in Canada, working with all of the international markets, Brazil, Asia, UK, et cetera, et cetera. And New York City now has about 17 offices that touch 30 different markets across the world. So you can see sort of like how wide and how far that goes. And so it's just been, that was just sort of like a great opportunity, and really got me steeped into like all of the different aspects of tourism, both on business travel and leisure travel, and understanding how meetings and conventions works, and what destination marketing really, really, really is, and just really understanding how all the hospitality sector works as well. So yeah, so I'm like, and then there's more. It's been, I feel like when I talk about it sequentially and chronologically, I'm like, wow, okay, it's a lot. It's been a number of years. But after that, I took an opportunity to sort of step out on my own and do something more entrepreneurial. And from about 2013, until really 2018 or so, 17, 18 or so, was working more on my own, more entrepreneurially, doing travel PR on like the agency side, and things of that nature. And then I left. And then and then I decided to, in a number of years, I think it was 2017 or 2018 or so, when I just decided I was going to try something a little bit different and stretch my legs, and not necessarily do communications anymore. And so I ended up working in the New York City Council, in the legislature, and this was actually after a tourism project that I was working on. The New York Wheel had actually folded, and so, full disclosure, we're talking about career paths. I got laid off, right? Our project ended, and so that was also, part of the impetus was like, is communications what I want to do, for the foreseeable future, what I always want to do with my career, or am I capable? Can I do other things? And I have other interests, and how do they all work together? How do they not work together? And so this was also another moment for me, to explore that. So I still have hope that maybe the New York Wheel, the largest, observation wheel potentially in the world, will maybe someday come to fruition, but I think now is not that moment. And so that was the other sort of kick in the pants to also try something a little bit different. And so I was with the council actually for just a few short months before I received also an amazing opportunity to work at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which was also definitely a departure because it's an industrial park in the middle of Brooklyn, which does amazing things and is home to some really amazing and innovative businesses, but not necessarily what one would think of as a tourism destination. But I was running the external affairs team, so really still having hand back in communications. There I was, found myself back in that place again, but also all of the educational programming, public programming, government affairs, marketing and branding, and actually grant writing as well, since the organization was a nonprofit. And then, so I was there actually for almost 3 years, and then again, another amazing opportunity to join the Biden administration. So hence me moving to Washington, D.C. for a little over a year, where I was a senior advisor for the Office of Government Contracting and Business Development at the Small Business Administration. So very interesting, and sort of like, it's an amazing experience to be able to say that you work for the President of the United States and to have this opportunity to work for an administration who's, you share and you value all of what their agenda is, and being able to find another capacity to serve. And you work with a lot of really amazing and innovative businesses in this capacity. It was just a really cool experience for me.
And Tiffany, I have a question because
But
I'm
now I'm back
passionate
because I couldn't stay
about,
away from tourism and I couldn't stay away from communications.
yeah, and I have this, deeply understanding also because you were so great in tourism and this PR and communication, and then you switched to political, but also back when you started and now again. So in any of those transitions in your career, have you ever felt like, hey, I'm a woman of color, or people are treating me some type of way, or you leverage that to your benefit? How do you flex that?
Well, I think even, in travel and hospitality and tourism now, I still think that there's definitely a discussion about representation and diversity across the industry, right? You go to trade shows, you go to different meetings, and you don't often see people that look like you. And I will say, even from just a straight communication standpoint, I don't know that I necessarily see as many women of color in leadership positions as I would hope. And so, sometimes it is just recognizing and trying to figure out how you're going to create a seat at the table for yourself and keep yourself visible. So that is part of the equation. Sometimes you are leveraging it and reminding folks, okay, well, you know what, you actually do have a representation problem, and you sort of need me here, right? You're going to find value in what I'm bringing to the table, right? And so it's a little bit of balance. I think it definitely depends on the situation, but I still think it is very, the issue of diversity in so many of these roles is still something that just still a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely. And huge shout outs, by the way, to your team, because I did see earlier this year on Q1 a huge local promotion for, Washington Heights, where all the Latinos are. And you actually, when I saw those videos, I was like, oh my gosh, that was my hangout spot when I was heading out to Westchester, on one way from Harlem. So it's like, it's so amazing to see that you are leveraging really the community, and really the small businesses, and it's like that broad aspect of Manhattan is beyond, right, just
100%.
Times Square. Tourism is beyond just Manhattan. You have Brooklyn, you have Queens, you have State Island, it's just so much more, right? And just to put in a short video, I think it was like a minute or less, but huge amazing work,
Thank
just, yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to share this how many times.
And so I think that's our local legends campaign. And so we did one for each borough, and huge shout out to our editorial and content team, who actually, like, the full video is about, each of them are about 6 minutes. and they focus on one neighborhood in one in each borough. And so the next one, the last one, and the next one is Brooklyn. That's going to be out later at the end of this month. But Mott Haven was the first one in the Bronx, and then we did Washington Heights. And it's like the team feels like they said we took a chance, right? In this day and age where everything should be 15 seconds, 30 seconds, quick, 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 to do a little bit more of a documentary style, something 6 minute, 6 minute type of video. Was a little bit of a leap of faith, but it works because I think it's beautifully produced and it really touches communities that often are not the first communities that you think of when you're talking about tourism to New York City. And so really that's the idea behind doing it, is really like, yes, there's always going to be Manhattan, there's city center, and there's going to be all the sort of like classic hallmarks, iconic things that you know about New York. But there's so much more. We have 5 boroughs. There's so many things to see and do, and that you're only just skimming the surface, right? And so part of it is really pushing people out to neighborhoods that they haven't considered, and highlighting things that people never don't think are necessarily tourism facing, and really shining a spotlight on it. Because I think one thing that's true for New York City is that visitors really want to do the things that locals do. And so this is also our way into it. You want to see where we go, where we hang out. This is where we're also doing it.
Yeah, and absolutely. One of the highlights for me was definitely the Washington Heights, and, all of the amazing cuisines and the local spots, because, that actually survived right after the pandemic. And how did these people made it, so definitely, made me super happy to see, this campaign going on. But coming back to you, because now I know that you are a newly mother with a lovely baby with 3 year old.
Yes.
So how are you managing, being on this position with New York and Company, and then now being a mom and other projects that you're doing? So how are you managing all of that?
I'm not. And I think most there's a lot of parents in general who would say that it's hard a lot of days. A lot of days it's great, and you think you're like, maybe I kind of have it together, but it is a lot of logistics that I think most parents would say that it's being a working parent. And I would say that hybrid has actually been good for our family, being able to have a little bit more flexibility about where you need to be. But it is a challenge. Daycare and childcare and all of that kind of stuff is hard here. It's hard, it's expensive, and I think that that's like an ongoing conversation that a lot of communities and every family is pretty much having. But it's really, it's that fine juggling act, because this job that I have does require that I travel a decent amount. And so it's that constant conversation with my husband about where I need to be. We were in South America 2 weeks ago, and I've been to Mexico and India already this year, and that's just the international travel. And so we're on the road a decent amount, but that's also, is what comes with the territory of working in travel and hospitality. Is meeting people in person is so important to the work that we do. And so and we also get the ROI on it. And so you just kind of take it as it comes and figure it out. And especially having a kid that's 3, it's like toddlers are, as I like to call it, a soft tornado. They're a lot, and it's like constant change, and like they just grow so much in those first couple of years of life that it's like it feels like there are a lot of new things all the time that you're constantly managing. And I would say that that's probably the other thing that's hard, is like you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I now navigate this new situation, right? Suddenly, my kid went from being an awesome sleeper to like, now he figured out he doesn't have to stay in bed if he doesn't want to, and he wants to like come hang out in the middle of the night. And so it means nobody's sleeping, and what are we doing about that? But that's sort of like the real talk about parenting or potty training and things like that. It's not easy. And so you're juggling all of these things behind the scenes, but it's just sort of this delicate dance that you're doing on a daily basis. So I think it teaches you to like slow down, because probably cannot do as much as you think you can. And honestly, it's not worth it. I think that's like possibly one of the upsides to having a kid is like you realize like just it pushes a lot of things to the periphery. And I think in some ways it makes you actually better at making decisions because you have to focus on what's really important in terms of taking care of your child, taking care of your family.
So Tiffany, that is great that you're trying to manage all of this work-life balance, right? Being a mom, being a professional woman. But I wanted to ask you one last question as a suggestion to all of the women out there listening to us. What would you recommend them to do? If any recommendations and tips, I think it's are welcome, to be successful as a working mom, a working professional, and a leader in the hospitality industry.
Ooh, that's a whole other podcast. Well, I mean, I think on the professional side, just I think it's so important for women to you can't be afraid to ask, right? I heard a great phrase is, if you don't ask, you don't get. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody could say no, and you can try to ask for a different answer from them or again or somebody else. So I think it's important to ask, and it is important to also know what you're asking for. I sometimes I find that so when I do meet younger women who are coming up, they will just the sometimes they want support and information, but they're not sure really what they're asking for. Right. You may want to know more about my career, but do you want to know more about a specific skill set? Right. Or do you want to know my path and be very clear sort of what you're asking? Or do you want an introduction, right, to somebody or something along that line? So always be really clear on what you're asking. And you'd be amazed at how many people are willing with a clear ask to just be willing to help you out, right, and get you a little bit more in the direction that you want to go. And it takes a lot of people, and I think back on how many people I've talked to over how many years, that end up sort of pushing you in different directions and sort of help you along the way. It's not always just one mentor who's always guided you. Sometimes it's just a conversation. You and I met at probably a cocktail reception or something, and sometimes it's as simple as that somebody sparks an idea that brings you to your next place, and that might be all it is. And so support comes in all shapes and sizes. And so and sort of so take that with it. Like, what can you take from the different conversations that you're having with people along the way? I mean, and then in terms of parenting, it's use Google, your calendar, and over communicate. Say it twice, write it down. That's probably my best piece of advice, because at some point someone's going to mix up daycare pickup and your kid's going to be sitting there. So it's the best piece of advice that I have. Double up on everything, and write it down a lot. A little over communication never hurts. Never hurts with your partner. But I also think that it's important that your kids also see you out there doing things that make you happy, and quite frankly that have nothing to do with that, right? I think that you can't be a good parent if you're not a happy person. And so whether you are in the workforce or not, you have to have things that are not attached, that are just for you and not in any way attached to your children. And so for me, one piece of that is having a job that I love. And so I think that that's good for my son to know that we can exist without each other. We're both going to be fine. And I think it makes the time that we are together that much better.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much,
That's my,
Tiffany,
that's
for
my story.
all of this. But I'm gonna take you up to that. We're gonna have another podcast just to talk about what are your, in terms of skill sets for women that are looking to join the hospitality
Absolutely.
career, in this
I
day
would
and
love
age.
it.
And I can't, this will be a redo, podcast series 2, Wilk and Tiffany. And I
I
appreciate
love it. I love it.
so much for joining me today. And thank you everyone for listening to the Leadership Talks podcast. Until next time.